Hey, everybody. Welcome to Daniel Davis Deep Dive. Again, we're coming live from Washington, D.C. And we have another guest today who's also live from elsewhere in Washington, D.C., actually coming to us live from American University. It is Scott Strgacich. Welcome to the show, Scott.
Thanks for having me, Danny. Happy to be with you.
Yeah, so I like that dig there. I mean, I'm a big fan of American University. My wife graduated, got her master's there, and John F. Kennedy gave that famous peace speech there from probably not far from where you're sitting right now. So there's a lot of great things about American University.
Yeah, absolutely. No, it's the place to be. School of International Services. We are waging peace, and that's the mission statement. So I'm going to keep doing it.
Wow, I love that. I didn't actually know that was the case.
Yeah.
Now, Scott, you're also a research assistant at Defense Priorities while you're getting your master's there. Where are you going to go with this? Do you have any idea what you're going to do once you get your degree?
Yeah, I'm still mulling over a lot of options, but I've spent some time in government. I've kind of landed on the mission that I'd like to go back. I spent some time in Congress. I'm sure we'll be talking about Congress a bit today. And I really like the feel of working for a principal, for a member, for tackling a host of foreign policy issues and a variety of issues in a really fast-paced setting. So hoping to find myself back there one day soon.
Well, you're right in the middle of it right now. Certainly Defense Priorities is kind of front and center with all the stuff that's going on, although these wars going on both in Russia and Ukraine, and now, unfortunately, in Israel with Hamas. We're going to speak a little bit today, though. We're going to delve in on a couple of specific aspects of the first of those, which is the Russia-Ukraine situation. And just kind of set the stage for all of our viewers here. The offensive that Ukraine had launched to much fanfare in June didn't quite work out the way that many in the West were hoping for, and certainly those in Kiev were not looking forward to. And then there's a big question right now as to what should the United States do now? What is our obligation, our responsibilities? And so I want to show you how things have shifted a little bit since the first of this year, before the offensive was launched. And you've heard various American senior officials voicing the American position on what we're going to do. First of all, we're going to start back in January in a press conference where we had John Kirby address the press pool and talked about this.
What do you mean by that? As long as they need. What do you mean by that? What winning looks like for you in Ukraine?
Well, as long as it takes means as long as it takes, and it means that I'm unable to give you a date certain on calendar for when that support won't be necessary anymore. It's necessary now. It's going to be necessary in coming weeks and months for certain. And we want to make sure that we're meeting the need as best we can for Ukraine. And what does winning look like? President Zelensky gets to determine what victory looks like.
Okay, well, that was kind of interesting right there. So I thought at the time that was a little odd to say that the leader of a foreign government gets to decide, when the end is reached and what the objective is. And like, it's just America's like, hey, we got a bill here and we got to pay the bill because that's what they've charged us with. So that's how the enthusiasm was at the time. We're going to give them whatever they need for as long as it takes. That's kind of the mantra that's going on there. And now you see that we're not even calling the shots. We're just doing whatever they're asking us to do. And that was kind of the position of the government. Well, this offensive started in June. And then a little bit into this in July, President Biden, though, said this.
There is no possibility of him winning the war in Ukraine. He's already lost that war. Imagine anyway, he's already lost that war.
So, wow, that's good news. So apparently the offensive had worked and the Ukraine side was winning and Russia's lost. I mean, man, now I guess it's time to start putting the champagne on ice because, dang, I mean, they've already lost. So apparently, it's the game over a little bit. But then it didn't quite work out that way on the battlefield. And so the reality starts seeping in. And now then Ukraine, because they didn't make any penetrations at the front line, are adamantly talking about another weapon system, which the National Security Advisor addressed in August.
I will say that over the course of the past 2 years, there have been a lot of analyses of how this war would unfold coming from a lot of quarters, and we've seen numerous changes in those analyses over time as dynamic battlefield conditions change. So what we have said from multiple podiums and multiple briefings remains the same, which is we're doing everything we can to support Ukraine in its counteroffensive. We're not going to handicap the outcome. We're not going to predict what's going to happen because this war has been inherently unpredictable. What we did this week is formalize through a letter from Secretary Blinken to his counterparts in Europe that upon the completion of that training, the United States would be prepared in consultation with Congress to approve third-party transfer of F-16 aircraft to Ukraine. There have, for reasons I don't fully understand, been questions about whether we were actually going to do that. So to put all of those questions to rest, that in fact the training will be followed by the transfer as we work with Congress to effectuate that and with our allies.
So within 3 weeks, you had President Biden saying, oh yeah, Russia's lost. I mean, that's just, anyway, as he says. And then you have Sullivan saying, well, I mean, I'm not going to handicap how this thing's going. I mean, it's really complicated, but we're going to bring F-16s in because that's going to provide a game changer. And, we're going to start that process. Of course, later on, they would say that, well, of course, we won't even be able to get them trained until later this year. So probably it'll be next spring before those things can come in, long after this offensive has petered out or played out and however it was going to. And unfortunately, now we know. But since, as you've seen on many of our previous deep dive episodes, the offensive was a complete failure. I mean, it didn't accomplish anything, not even a small tactical advantage, and has basically now been frozen in its current position for over a month now. And most likely that's about as far as it's ever going to get. So we started this with Kirby in January. Now then we had Kirby just a couple of days ago lay this bombshell on it.
But in the near term, we've got appropriations and authorities for both Ukraine and for Israel. But you don't want to be trying to bake in long-term support when you're at the end of the rope. And in Ukraine, on the Ukraine funding, we're coming near to the end of the rope.
So we started the year with, we're going to give them whatever they need for as long as it takes. Into the offensive we had, things are going good. We're going to continue to help them. And by the way, Russia's already lost to, we're not going to handicap this. We'll see how it goes, to we're at the end of the rope and we're not going to bake in long-term support. Scott, what does that mean in terms of the U.S. and how do you account for that big change?
Yeah, it's a significant statement, as you said. I think with the Kirby statement in particular, it can be read a couple ways. First, there's the immediate crisis, the immediate political dimension that it's, I think, trying to address. As we all know, Congress has been kind of in a state of chaos since the ouster of Kevin McCarthy. Congress can't approve any new substantial aid. It can't retract any aid. It can't do much of anything until a speaker is selected. So I think the most acute objective here was to get Congress moving on that process, on the leadership process. I mean, Congress is going to certainly act only when it absolutely feels it is under the gun. I'm a veteran of Congress. I can tell you that plainly. But more than that,
actually, on that point there,
sure.
What I assume you probably still have some contacts and some colleagues still up on the Hill and whatnot. So, as far as you understand, how is the mood in Congress about giving more money? Because I want to say maybe as recently as August, there was some intent of making another $24 billion aid package that the president was trying to get through. And then when Zelensky came to town for the UN summit in September, as we put on this show, one of the senators who came out of that meeting said he was told that the administration actually wanted $100 billion over the next year, and they were, going to put it in chunks. But then when it came time to start negotiating for the what turned out to be a continuing resolution, the Senate had reduced it down to only $6 billion, and then the House, basically, when they signed that CR, it was all out. So then it went from down to zero. Now then, as you point out, with all this chaos around the speakership of even doing normal business up on the Hill, What are they going to do when they come back and they try to have that next negotiation on the 17th of December? I'm sorry, 17th of November, when the CR expires, and we try to avoid the shutdown again. If that funding is still an issue, and now you heard Kirby say we're at the end of the rope and we're not doing long term. What are people up on the Hill thinking about this, and what do you expect when we get to this 17 November?
Yeah, when it's really unfortunate. It's become. I mean, everything is a political issue on the Hill. Let's be clear about that. But it has become very partisan in that it's starting to be drawn more acutely on partisan lines. So a lot of the skepticism about Ukrainian defense funding is coming principally from the Republican conference. Certainly, there are members of the Progressive Caucus and the Democratic side who also have voiced their own concerns about aid, about escalation, about all the things that you and I are also concerned about. But as Republicans become more vocal about their own skepticism about the long-term prospects of aid, you get this kind of backlash on the other side, right? You have now Democrats feeling an imperative to strengthen their resolve for Ukraine aid, if for no other reason than just because the Republicans are saying the opposite thing. It's silly, and I think you and I would very much like to have a good faith informed debate among our elected representatives, but that's just not always how it works, especially when politics are high pitch.
So help me understand here. Let's look at it from the Democrat side, and on the battlefield, it's pretty self-evident that the offensive didn't accomplish anything. It didn't even break through the first main belt of Russian defensive. They got up to it in August. They never penetrated through it, and now then they've used up all these, the main striking power of everything that we gave them. I mean, no matter what politics say, and again, we're talking about behind the scenes here, not on the cameras, as much as what do either the staff members or the members themselves think about? Okay, we're kind of on the hook for this. We've been saying we want to give all this funding to Ukraine for as long as it takes, but now all of a sudden we see it ain't right on the battlefield. Do we want to just keep saying, yeah, we're going to give them money anyway because that's what we said before, and the Republicans aren't for it? How do they square that tough knot of, I don't want to throw good money after bad, but I also don't want to be seen bad in politically with my opponents who will jump on this? How does that play out?
Yeah, that's a great question. From what I can tell, especially on the Democratic side, there still isn't the degree of concern about that dynamic that I think we would like to see. If anything, I mean, the Democrats are pretty enthused by the chaos in the Republican conference, and so they're going to frankly twist the knife, and so it's not. This is kind of widespread from the public facing stuff to how the Democratic caucus is internally operating. That there's this understanding that Ukraine aid and now Israel aid is this kind of appendage of this broader house battle, and that's the depth that most members are looking at it through. They're not, to my knowledge, they're not really terribly concerned with the long-term prospects of providing aid. They're not. I bet you a million most members are not watching every step on the battlefield, every Ukrainian village that has exchanged hands like you and I are. I mean, we're obsessed with this stuff generally, but that's our curse. But members of Congress aren't watching this stuff very closely for the most part. And so
I mean, is it fair to say that they actually don't even, maybe not care is a little bit too strong, maybe it's not, that they're just not concerned with how the actual ebb and flow of the battle is going, or even what it looks like going long term? Or maybe is it that they're not aware of what it's going to do long term? Maybe they think it's going to be a stalemate. So yeah, we'll just keep throwing cash in it and see how we can manipulate that to have a political advantage here in Washington, D.C. Which of those things do you think is going on from your experience?
I think the answer is yes. There's a balance of both to be. I mean, there's just general ignorance. And yeah, you're right. I don't think I would say they don't care. That might be a bit too callous, but certainly there's the kind of kicking the can down the road dynamic. You see this with budgets, and you see this with now defense aid. We're hearing that the most likely outcome and probably the best outcome of the upcoming budget negotiations that you mentioned in November is probably just going to be another CR. Now, the CR based on the last CR is no money for Ukraine. We'll probably see some money for Israel, but as has been talked about, now that we have these two growing defense commitments abroad, for our friends abroad, we're really getting stretched thin here.
So, but do you think we're actually going to get a CR? I mean, will they even be able to do that? That assumes, first of all, that we have a speaker by then, which apparently is no given the chaos that continues to reign up there. But let's just say that they finally, the Republicans finally get their house in order and at least put somebody in the position there. He's going to be hamstrung by a lot of the same forces that McCarthy was before. So, I mean, getting a budget, I don't think is on the table. I don't think anybody's thinking that. But can we at least get a CR? And it seems to me that even that's not a given. How do you see that?
Yeah, that's a real tough one. In my personal opinion, a CR is the best option, that the best outcome that we could see from this. Nobody's really seriously considering a budget. There's some talk on the Democratic side. We heard Leader Jeffries, I think yesterday, said that he's open to some kind of bipartisan solution. He was very nebulous about what that means. What that could potentially mean for a future budget negotiation, assuming it even goes moderately well and we have a speaker in place by that time, is the Democrats could probably, in return for some support for a bipartisan speaker candidate, or something that we've heard about recently, maybe we get some Ukraine aid. We get some fulfillment of the administration's priorities on that front. But if we're talking like the $20 to $100 billion that we've been looking at over the past few months, the last year and a half, per tranche of defense aid, I just don't see that happening in this Republican Congress, whether we have a speaker or not.
So let's go back to that last comment by Kirby, because it was a bombshell. That's the first time that the anybody in the administration has even hinted that there might be an end to the support. And now he used that end of the ropes, like we're at the end of the rope of our money rope. So is that a signal from the Democrat administration that even the Democrats may be wavering on having more money, meaning that there might be more willingness on the Democratic side to have some sort of negotiated settlement to get a CR?
Yeah, I mean, interestingly, I would actually read it another way. I would, and this might be a bit controversial, but I've always felt that the administration is, for all of its many faults, more conscious of these issues and cautious about them than your average member of Congress. There's a real imperative to sound tough, to talk tough, and to spend tough in Congress, especially in the House when you're running for re-election every 2 years. We've seen some indication from deep within the bowels of the Biden White House that there is concern and that they are thinking about this stuff, but what they do and say in public is something very much different. We're standing with Ukraine. We'll do so for as long as we need to. We will always be there, right? But we have seen some kind of quiet conversations. So how I would read this, one of the ways I'd read this is one of those quiet conversations maybe seeping out into the open, that we're aware of this, we're worried about it, we are concerned about it, we're coming to the end of our rope. It could also interestingly be read as maybe a slight subtle signal to President Zelensky that while we support you,
I'm not sure how subtle that is, but anyway, yeah, I'll keep going.
Yeah, well, it might not be as subtle as President Zelensky would want it to be, but it's a signal. It's a signal to Congress. It's a signal to Zelensky that this is not something that can go on forever, and it is not something that the U.S. is willing to tether itself to forever. Okay,
now let's shift gears. We're running low on time here, but I don't want to miss this part here. Let's shift gears a little bit to the Republican side, because there's even more chaos there, even within the conference itself, and not just in, do they want to stick a knife into the Democrat side, in the opposite direction for political benefit. But you have within the Republican Party some pretty starkly different views on giving money to Ukraine, where some are saying, like McConnell in the Senate, man, we definitely need to be giving them all this stuff, and and uses really strong language about what we have to do, et cetera. And then you've got others, and I even hate to say his name out loud, but Gates, he represents a faction that's on the exact opposite end of that. But a lot of the Republican conference seems to be a little bit weighted to the side of Gates, if not to the other side. But there's a pretty big split there. So first of all, how are they going to get enough votes to get behind one speaker? And where do you think their position is going to come out on the Ukraine aid, especially to get a speaker before they even get into the negotiations on the next CR?
Yeah, I don't really know how they're going to get to a speaker at this point. I've been watching the negotiations within the GOP conference pretty closely from my own vantage point. They don't even know at this point. Scalise dropped out yesterday. There are folks saying that I'll never vote for Jordan. It's a wild situation. So how we will get to a speaker, I don't know. It'll probably have to be some deal with like you said, the folks on Gates's end of things. But regardless of what the speaker outcome looks like, the Gates camp in the conference is going to wield a lot of power. I don't see the motion to vacate rule going away anytime soon either. So they're always going to hold that sword of Damocles
sword just hanging over whoever gets the next one.
Absolutely, yeah. So that's going to be an issue going forward. Best outcome for the Biden administration is a fairly low amount of aid. I'd be surprised if it exceeds $10 billion. But we might.
Yeah. I was going to say that because probably
no aid.
If that is true, what you said about a subtle message coming from the White House to Zelensky, even with in the Republican conference, I can't see them going, we're going to go from 100 miles an hour to zero and literally just stop aid, because that would, again, politically, even domestically, could potentially harm them coming into an election year. But I can see them, as you say, having a significant reduction in order to send another signal that Zelensky, okay, look, brother, I get it that you hate the Russians and you want to get them kicked out, but there is a limit here. And I can assure you other capitals throughout the West and all of NATO are watching this very, very closely, because none of them, I believe, behind the scenes want to give anything more, because they recognize the truth of it, no matter what they say in public, because they have to keep a united front, of solidarity and all this. But I can assure you that especially the countries that are given the most are not wanting to continue throwing their tanks, their armored personnel carriers, and their money in behind something that they don't think is going to succeed. And I think they'll only be too happy for this signal to be, deepened from Congress and then subsequently from the White House that things are going to tail off, which means now then Zelensky is unfortunately going to be placed in a position to where he's tried to avoid the whole time, which is you have to either say, we're going to fight on without the support that we have, in which case there's militarily, I don't think they can even maintain a stalemate in that case. I think they would outright lose the war, or try to make a negotiated settlement to get the best deal you can in the near term to hang on to as much as you have. And that's going to make him a pariah in his own country. And it's going to be a hard one talking about politically.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, most likely scenario, I think, is some kind of stalemate. I don't think Zelensky's going to put his pen to paper on, for something that would actually cede Ukrainian territory formally to Russia. But these are not things I think that a lot of folks in Congress are thinking about. And like you said, there are big cleavages in the Republican side on aid. If the House does pass a budget or a CR that would remove aid entirely, or even just give a small, tidbit of aid from what the Biden administration is asking for. Like you said, Leader McConnell is really strongly in favor of Ukraine. He's been consistently in favor of Ukrainian aid, and he'll probably fight that. So there'll probably be some back and forth between the chambers on that particular issue.
Yeah, that's going to be an ugly fight. And the last thing here is what's your best guess on first of all, when we'll have a speaker, and then or maybe even a better question is, will we have a speaker before the government gets to its next shutdown moment, and what is the prospects of a government shutdown on 17 November?
I left my crystal ball at home.
Oh, dang it. I should have told you to bring it.
I know, I should have brought it. I will say I think we will have a speaker by the deadline, by the shutdown deadline in November. I think there something will happen. They will contrive some way to get a speaker, but I still think the likelihood of a shutdown is fairly high, because that speaker is almost certainly going to be tethered to forces within the Republican conference that are going to want to cut not just Ukraine aid, but spending on a whole variety of toxic topics. And so there's going to be a big battle. I think there's a pretty high chance that there's going to be a shutdown in November. Hope I'm wrong, but I somehow don't think I am.
Yeah, I hope you are too. But I'm sure, Scott, when it gets closer to that, we're going to have you back on to talk about these very issues, because that's stuff that's important to America, but not just foreign policy, but every other kind of policy that we have in the country right now. And man, as much as I hate all the stuff that's going on there, I just want to see these guys get their house in order, because we all need that, because everybody loses when the government is dysfunctional as this. But that's it. We have what we have. But
yeah.
Anyway, Scott, thanks for your time. Really appreciate this, and look forward to having you back soon.
Thanks so much, Danny. Appreciate it.
And we'll see everybody on the next episode of Daniel Davis Deep Dive. Remember to like and subscribe and share it. Send to your friends, because you're getting stuff here you're not getting anywhere else. We have Washington insiders like Scott here, who's actually been up there and still has contacts. And we're going to continue to give you that quality of people. And as we'll see more as we go on. See you next time on Daniel Davis Deep Dive.